Yeah, that track was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because what you saw in those results was some different riders getting up in the mix. And another thing to bear in mind with this is, I think, two factors that I thought about a lot. The first was the the stage we are in the season. So within the last two rounds, potentially stuff is on the table for the overall. Riders are trying to manage the race. I know it was quite interesting because Dakota messaged me between the semi and the final, and I think Dakota's semi was possibly the run of the day. To be honest, when you watched it and he crashed, and that's game over, really. That's like, well, he's not making the final. But the nature of his crash and the ability to jump straight back up and get back on the bike and push to get down was incredible to get in. I think he was fifth in the semi with that
Yes,
crash, which is
fifth.
unbelievable off the bike. Um, but you could tell from his mindset, he was thinking about the risk. You know, am I going to risk everything on a risky line when actually I could get down and get a podium? So he had that, you know, where do I go here? Do I risk everything and throw caution to the wind, or do I try to manage it? And he did an astounding job, I think, to put in that run on home soil and sort of find probably what he called a happy medium. Because he's obviously come in with a lot of momentum from the US Open. He's on home soil. And I think the being on home soil for a US rider, I don't know because I'm not American, but I would think it almost plays into your hands even more because you spend so much time on the other side of the world. You know, the World Cup series is predominantly based in Europe. So you're a long way from home and you're living at a hotel beds and you know the score. You spent months on the road and eventually you finally go home and you're like, hey, I'm home. And I do think that helps. And the other factor that I think plays in potentially is that the big factory teams can't take over their huge articulated lorries. They can't take over their next level of support. And it sort of makes the playing field a little more level. And so if you're used to pitting out of an easy up tent, nothing's changed. But if you're potentially used to having, you know what, we've got a truck upstairs in the Athertons with a big TV on it and we can sit down and review footage in an air conditioned, leather seated couch area, that's not Snowshoe, is it? So you're maybe having to adapt a little bit more. Some riders, it will feel a little bit alien. Um, and the third thing is actually where the pits were, because the pits are at the top. And Danny was telling me that their pit setup was actually in the garage of the hotel they were staying at, and they could see the start line from the hotel room. So this is a very different setup to what people are used to, and I think some of these elements might sort of mix things up a bit, mightn't they?